the continuing saga of this Christian man, family man, in an intact family. All right, got that? Intact family man, arrested, harassed, abused, lied about, indicted, falsely indicted, harassed by Chattanooga's finest in the Hanson Melvin case, in which Officer David Roddy, thanks to Hanson Melvin's standing on his rights, standing on his ground. Not Roddy, Officer David Campbell, forgive me. David Roddy is the acting chief in the retirement from the scene of Chief Fletcher. David Roddy is the chief of staff in that military organization known as the police department. But David Campbell was fired for violating policy, but he was not indicted, even though the lawsuit against him and the city names numerous crimes that are statutorily defined crimes that he took part in. Make sure you read more at Nooganomics.com. That's Nooganomics.com, our chief sponsor. And this is David Tulis. I have a good story that came out late Saturday, or maybe it was Monday. A story Monday about the gathering in Dayton, and the story is, in a way, it's a good account of whom all was there. May Beavers, who running for governor, spoke, and Judd Matheny, a state representative who's running for Congress, also spoke, and numerous others did. Numerous ministers of the gospel whose main argument seemed to be that creation is important. The doctrine of creation is important, and that the trial of John Scopes in 1925 in the Dayton Circuit County courtroom, the Scopes monkey trial, that was over a real issue, and that Christianity and the Bible have not lost the battle. They have not lost the fight, even though evolutionary theory is persuasive to many. It is just that. It is a theory. It is a concept in crisis, as scientific works of recent note have pointed out. Dr. Behe, for example, talks about the irreducible minimum, and there in that idea, it points to creation. For example, the eye. The eye cannot work at all. It can't evolve unless there is an irreducible minimum at which it has to start. So there could be improvements in the eye over time. Certain species may have improved night vision, let's say, or sharper acuity, but you can't have macroevolution that says eyes evolved, just like lungs evolved and everything else. There is because they can't possibly, even in the theory of evolution, they can't possibly evolve to be at their fine power as they are now. Even if you had billions of years to allow it, there can't be something that precedes the existence of the eye that then becomes the eye, and that's the irreducible minimum. So that theory is it's a cockeyed theory that has let men get away with murder, and let managerial elites get away with public schools. Right? It all comes from evolution. And the idea there is you manage evolution, you control society from the top down, so that only the good people, right, only the right people reproduce, have the elite jobs, have the levers of authority in their hands. It's an evolutionary system, and a very, very materialist system. So that was the kind of thing discussed with the lectures and the presentations, more than 2 hours worth. In Dayton on Saturday. And there's a report at Nooganomics.com, and there's a kind of not mystical, but there's a kind of sadness that pervades that report because the country is in twilight. So I mentioned in the headline, to get this idea out there, the headline makes reference to nostalgia, right? There's a nostalgia in hearing John Adams quoted, in hearing about the Patriots, the committees of correspondence, all the things that we sometimes hear about, that we hear about on the 4th of July, right? And in the days preceding the national independence celebration. There's nostalgia because those things cannot be restored, and there are changes that are against government, they're against the law, they're against the Constitution, but they are you might say there's a cultural annihilation of the promises of the founders, and that has been long in the making, and it's long past. I mean, the fact that the end of these fine pieces of government are long past, right? It's not that it's just ahead, right? The danger is not just around the corner if we let this bill pass, or if we don't fund this program, this is going to happen. Well, these things have already happened. And I think that's the most realistic position to take. I'm not one of those screaming conservatives who say, if this bill passes, we've lost the constitutional republic. Well, we lost it a long time ago, repeatedly, and it's like being raped many times, right? Once you're raped the first time, the 10th rape and the 30th rape, they're all equally as bad, and you lose count. And that's kind of what we've had to endure. You, my listener, I would say you've had to endure it because you're aware of the issue. And that's why you tune into my show, David Tulis, here, because you're aware that I will kind of give you some sense of those issues. And you might say we can grieve together, but more importantly than that, we can have nostalgia together. But really, more importantly than that is that we take steps now to not restore the republic, right? That it cannot be restored, but that we restore, you might say, a more godly perspective, a more righteous local area. And there, I think much can be done. Even in the basics, much is undone because people, unlike those who attended that event Saturday, most people are careless about the public will, right? The Commonwealth. They're not caring about the Commonwealth. They don't care about government per se. They don't see God's hands in government. They don't see God's laws offended by government. And so they're not personally involved. That's why because they're not involved, that's explains why there's such a paucity of crowd outside the city council chamber when the city council voted for gay benefits. There should have been so many Christians there opposing this move that you would not have been able to reach the city hall at all, because for 5 blocks in any direction, there would have been Christian people saying, we are against this redefinition of marriage in the city ordinance, and we are against it. There would have been such a crowd, an uncontrolled mass of people so against this idea that for 5 blocks you would not be able to get to the city council chamber if you had been late. Like I was late that day, and I just walked right into the foyer. There was plenty of room for me to stand with my my taping equipment and all that. Why was there so much room for me? I should not have even been able to get there had Christian people had the sense to know that their creator, their God, was about to come under attack with that ordinance. Well, this is David Tulis, and the wistfulness we replace. We let wistfulness come on the 4th of July, but we pass on here on the 5th, and we're thinking about what we can do that's positive. What we can do that will make a difference for our families and in Chattanooga. And so that's the tenor of my report here. Now, I'm not going to, at this moment here, talk about these positive things. There are quite a few, but generally they are local economy and free market. There are, you summarize them as being in favor of local over national, right? Near over far, small over big, simple over complex, and personal over corporate, and physical over abstract. I wanted to mention something that happened just a couple days ago in Boston. There's a group of homosexual men called the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. I'm sure you've heard of them. They, in fact, were invited by the Boston Public Library as queers. They're queer nuns. One is called Sister Inferior, and the other one is called Sister Hysterectoria. I mean, that word has all kinds of things in there, body parts and hysterectomies and whatnot. But they are an anti-Christian group openly devoted to promiscuity. The scripture talks about the need for the need for obedience to God's laws and for self-restraint when it comes to one's desires. But they mock that the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence mock that self-government as ludicrous and shameful. There's the story here is from LifeSiteNews.com. LifeSite News, very, very well done website. And the library announced the arrival of these two queers with this: let's end Pride Month with a drag queen story time. That is, join us on Thursday, June 29 at 3:30 for another visit of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. Of course, these there were people on the Facebook side of that organization who said this is really bigotry, and it's a form of child abuse. There's a professor, Robert George, from Princeton. He criticizes these queer men and the library for promoting what the story says is Catholic hatred to 2 and 10-year-olds. He says, is there an honorable liberal anywhere in this country who will speak out against the anti-Catholic bigotry on display here? Imagine the chorus of outrage from liberals were it Islam and its teachings, symbols, and practices being mocked. He was the chairman of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, and he says that the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence are simply one way the sex, lib, lobby, and movement reveal that what they're really about is not equality, but self-indulgence, hedonism. And that is an abuse, of course. One of their sayings is an abuse of the commandment, go and sin no more. Queers have their own trademark slogan, go forth and sin some more. That is what they're all about, indulging yourself and rejecting self-government. But that's a kind of an unusual story. But there is a war culturally against the truth. There's a war culturally against marriage, and one brought by the elites, right? The elites of the country. There's a good report today by Charles Hugh Smith on his website of twominds.com that talks about a cultural fragmentation. Now, part of it in his analysis is in terms of the economy, and he's focusing on the top 2% of the people who earn the most money. Now, the left, I know, likes to talk about the elites. It likes to talk about the upper, the upper 1/2 of 1%, and somehow implying that, well, they're all Republicans, and that if Republicans get their way, if Donald Trump is elected, that these people will get away making more, and the common people will be hurt. Well, the argument in some ways is true, but I don't think it's a partisan. It is a partisan argument. You can make the same claim about the Democrats and the Republicans are both doing the same thing. They're both equally guilty in this fragmentation that is enlarging the gap between common people like you and me and the super rich. 80% of households earn 49% of the wealth of the income. The top 10% earn $185,000. Almost $186,000 a year. The top 2% average income is $308,786 according to a graphic put on his website by Charles Hugh Smith. So there is great gain among the top 0.1%, and that includes 152,000 people. The average income is $5 million, and they are up 385% from 1970 to 2008. Now, the bottom 90%, that's 137 million people. The average income among these is 31,000, and they are down 1%. So while in this period of time, these wages are down for common people, they're up for the wealthy, and that is why the rich, again, people who run think tanks, who run the media, who are in government or who are funded by government or have rich government contracts for research and the like, they have a very positive view of the national economy, and they're right from their perspective, things are going. They're going very well, but this is a fragmentation, Smith says, of society. We have people who think things are going well, and that's all they can see. They have a very positive narrative, and then there's the rest of us down here when we're all hurting. He says, in the good old days of secular growth of everything, energy consumption, wages, profits, employment, government spending, consumer debt, housing construction, business investment, and consumer spending, people in every economic class shared a common experience, right? Everybody got some of the gain. The pie was expanding. Everyone's slice was getting bigger. And there was enough trickle down for everybody to prosper. But that is no longer true. Those in the top 5% live in an entirely different economy than the bottom 80%. He says, if we combine the higher incomes with the rising wealth of the top slice of households, we get an even starker picture of fragmentation. Now, the people at the top, what do they have? Well, they have gold-plated health care insurance. They live in a world different from those people like you and me with huge deductibles. Those on Medicaid live in a more secure world than those with marginal private sector coverage. Households with 2 secure incomes have a completely different experience of the economy than those with insecure incomes that fluctuate year to year. Those who own their homes free and clear have a completely different reality from those struggling to pay their mortgage debt or their property taxes. We live in an economy of haves and have-nots, he says, and the latter between those earning $2,000 a month and those earning $20,000 a month has very few rungs. In other words, there are not a lot of people in between, right? Between you and those who earn $20,000 a month. The pie is shrinking for the vast majority of households, nibbled away by inflation, supposedly near zero, higher deductibles, fees, taxes, fines, interest, and so on. The technocrat and capital-owning class is delighted. They are delighted with the economy, and they can't understand why everyone like you isn't prospering. Their experience is that it's pretty darn wonderful, pretty darn amazing. And these, again, are the people in the media, in the philanthro-capitalist nonprofit sector, those in think tanks, the academics. They think that all is going well. But you, my listener, know that you know that it's not. You know that it's not going well. I have a sense that it's not going very well either. I'm in business. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a capitalist. I'm an investor. And here we run Hot News Talk Radio, and we have our pulse on the economy here in Chattanooga. And I'd say that things are not well. And on the other hand, you know, I want it to be well. I want it to be prosperous. I want there to be more investment locally. I want there to be more capital. I want there to be greater business for everybody, especially our advertisers. We have a great crew of advertisers here, and you know, our business in radio functions well when we get renewals, and we get a renewal when the advertiser says, well, you know, I advertised on Nooga Radio with David Tulis, with Sean Hannity, Colin Cowherd, Alex Jones, CBS News, NASCAR, NFL, NCAA, and we get more business. We have more business talking with you, the listener here at Nooga Radio. And so we're gonna write you another check, or we're gonna continue our deal with you at Nooga Radio. And that's what we want. There is success individually, but I think my sense is of the larger economy that there's not a lot of liquidity, not a lot of flexibility. And I think we have the national economy and the national government to blame for this state of affairs. The enemy is not Russia. The enemy is not Muslim warriors seeking jihad. The enemy is the modern state and its claim upon almost every part of the economy. There's hardly anything that the state doesn't claim to own or control. And to say differently is to invite a fight. If you say differently than that, you're going to have to fight for it. And that's that, of course, can be deleting of your reserves. That can be a very damaging thing. The state always outlasts its enemies, and we've seen it repeatedly. There are critics of government. There are critics of their whistleblowers who die. There are people who expose things that are going on in national government who end up committing suicide, with 5 shots to the head, that kind of thing. And it's not a great picture on the national side. But here in local economy in Chattanooga, we have optimistic perspective. And I do thank you, my listener, for joining me here at Nooga Radio. My name is David Tulis. We're brought to you by Nooganomics.com. Nooganomics has the story today about Hanson Melvin. Hanson Melvin filed suit within the time allowed by the statute of limitations on his case, which is a year. And he was falsely arrested, falsely accused, falsely indicted, and abused by police officers in a conspiracy involving at least 8 officers whose names were apparently not uncovered in the internal affairs investigation that should have gone into the second visit of this innocent man after he had been freed from jail the next morning. This was in May 2016. This is a remarkable story. And you'll find it only today, only at Nooganomics.com. That's Nooganomics.com, the website for the man who matters. Learn more about the Hanson Melvin case. It promises to expose a raw nerve here in Chattanooga. But we want police reform. We want reform there are 49 candidates for chief of police. And go to Nooganomics.com and hear what I told Chris Ramsey. Chris Ramsey is one of the 5 in a citizen advisory panel that the mayor has assigned to give him some names. Chris Ramsey would not give me an interview, would not give me any words. So I had some words for him. They came from me to him in the way of asking him to consider a reform-minded chief of police. And that was my request on your behalf. I said, well, I represent my listeners, and this is what they're interested in, and that's about as far as I could get with any members on that panel. This is David Tulis. I've got some great announcements for you to hear. Support our advertisers and support a free market radio station, locally owned, locally operated.
Nooga Radio, AM 1240, 92.7 FM.
Are you looking for a gospel-oriented, covenantal, family-friendly Reformed church? Dayton Reformed Presbyterian Church is a body of Christ-centered believers gathering for worship on